Welcome back to NFL Spotlight. Make sure you are subbed here on YouTube as we go around the NFL team by team previewing the 2025 season. It is day 3 of our team previews, and we're on to the New Orleans Saints. And joining us today, he is the founder of NewOrleans.Football, has built his own company from the ground up, and just does a tremendous job covering the team, the ins and outs. It is Nick Underhill. Nick, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Show's kind of like dominating Twitter, X, whatever they call it nowadays. See the clips all the time. Really excited to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
No, for sure. It's great to have you on. Like I told you offline, I have a lot of respect and admiration of what you've built, your own company, going independent, and where it's gone. And like I told you, like I feel like Saints fans gobble up every word you say, and it's deservedly so because you know that team really well and you do it the right way. So kudos to you, and it's great to have you on here. And I want to talk about this team because I'll be frank with you, nationally, the Saints are now being talked about a lot. They have 0 primetime games this year. It's year 1 of Kellen Moore. It is year 23 for GM Mickey Loomis. What is the overall vibes right now at training camp with this new staff? Because, like I said, we're just not really hearing much about them right now.
Yeah, look, I think the staff is good. They're smart. It's a new energy. It's really the first reset in more than 2 decades because it was just really the continuation of how Sean Payton was doing things. Last year they had the new offensive staff, but it was still within that same DNA. It's different now. It's everything is different. It used to be we would go out here for training camp and like it was just kind of like having a circadian rhythm where it was like red zone's going to happen at this point in camp, and then it was like, whoa, this is happening on day 2, and it's just kind of fascinating to see how they think about things because everything was kind of wrapped in the old school Bill Parcells cloth, and just as far as just even the practice schedule, one day they'll go full field, the next day they're doing red zone because they're thinking about how they can cut down on the burst and the acceleration and all that stuff. And I think that is badly needed here. I think Kellen Moore is incredibly smart. The defensive players absolutely love Brandon Staley and that staff. And I think the change there is really being welcomed. I just don't know if they have the players to really see the results in year 1, but it does feel like these might be the right people to help them build it.
Well, let me ask you about the stat before I get to the players, because Kellen Moore was hired this offseason. I remember when he was getting head coach interviews when he was still in Dallas, a lot of people would tell me, brilliant mind, not really sure if he could really run a full team. He started to evolve a little bit, went to the Chargers, went to the Eagles, which was a very big deal. Have you seen him now post Dallas after winning a Super Bowl in Philly with all those great players? Has he been someone where the message is getting across to a full team now that he's leading an organization?
I think so right now, but if it wasn't getting through right now, that would be incredibly alarming because everything's good and happy and hypothetical and all that stuff. I will say, like, he spoke at a coaching clinic up at LSU, and I put on some glasses and a hat and snuck in the back to go and watch him. And just kind of seeing him lead a room there, it was different than the personality when he's at the podium. It's just, up there talking to coaches, talking football, everything was just like really thought out and smart. It felt like he came to life. You saw him command the room, speak with a little bit of gusto. I do think that his partner in crime, Doug Nussmeier, definitely has the personality to bust some heads if he needs to. Really comes off like a nice uncle, but then you kind of see the dog in him. If you ask him a question he doesn't like, it turns on real quick, and it's like, ooh, all right. Like, I understand why these guys kind of go together and they've went from place to place to place. The real question, though, is going to be, like, what if they start the season 0-4, which is a distinct possibility with how their schedule sets up at the beginning of the year. And when things start going sideways, is everybody still bought in? I think he's done something that's really smart in terms of maybe preparing for a disaster, in that they've had, some might say, an excessive amount of team bonding activities. They've went to play paintball. They've went bowling, they've went to Top Golf, and I think maybe that stuff, investing in it now, maybe helps you get through some of them tough times when things go bad, because maybe there's a little more togetherness. The flip side to that would be you got 2 young quarterbacks and maybe neither one of them are ready to start the season, but I think there's a give and take there, and I think he's kind of sowing the seeds there just to make sure that he does have a together team, a team that can maybe withstand some turbulence, because there probably is going to be some this year, and I think it's going to come very, very quick in the season.
Well, let me ask you about the coordinator. So I'll start defensively. Brandon Staley, I don't know if you've done this research, but I don't remember it happening ever. You don't often see Brandon Staley was the head coach in LA. Kellen Moore was his OC. Now it's flipped. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but is that a weird dynamic or everything is, flowing as normal and it's all good?
I think it's flowing well, and I think Kellen Moore kind of needs a guy like that has been around, knows how to be a head coach, his that experience, someone he can lean on, someone he trusts, and it allows him to really just kind of focus on the offense. There isn't a lot of time spent over on the defensive side of the ball. They're changing their scheme this year, which is kind of interesting. They've really been a 4-3 team forever. Staley's a lot of 3-4 front, changes guys up quite a bit. Seeing Chase Young rush from a 2-point stance, I think is something that's going to help him quite a bit. Maybe it gives Isaiah Foskey a chance to get playing. And defensively, it's more of a vision-based defense in the back end, so it gives these guys more of a chance to make some plays than they have the last couple of years in Dennis Allen's scheme. But I think it's just like a really, really rejuvenating thing because some of the veteran players were incredibly frustrated with how they were playing last year. They kind of got more conservative. There wasn't a lot of blitzing, or even the DNs were lined up tight, and now they're out at the wide nine, Dwight Freeney type position, and they feel like they can take off and go. So maybe they'll be a little bit better on that side. Devon Godchaux, I think, is a massive addition for them. Their run defense has been terrible for the last couple of years. He's just a big engulfing presence. Comes over from New England. They made that trade for the 7th round pick. He's been a good player for them, but I think it's paper thin. I think their pass rushers have a lot of questions to answer. It's Chase Young and Carl Granderson, and I'm a little bit worried about what they're going to look like on that side. They've looked good so far in camp, but it's always that equation of, well, is the offense just not challenging them? And I think to a certain extent, yes.
I'll get to the defense here in a second, but I think the biggest question that everyone is wondering about is obviously on the offensive side with the quarterbacks, which is, I guess, a three-way competition with Spencer Rattler, the rookie Tyler Shough, and then Jake Hayner as well. It does sound like, based on your reporting, that Spencer Rattler has a lead right now. When do you think this could come to a head and we get a decision here? And is there an element where the coaching staff wants their guy, which is Tyler Shough, to maybe win this thing?
I'll give you some research here since I wasn't ready for the last one. They have 3 former NFL quarterbacks on their staff and 3 quarterbacks on their roster right now. And between those 6 people, they do not have a quarterback win in the NFL on the whole entire team. There is a tie. Scott Tolzien has a tie. Matt Flynn came in and led him back against, I think, the Lions in a game many years ago. But the only person that's ever won a game is Taysom Hill. He's 7-2. But none of these guys got one. So it's a super unique situation. Like, I keep trying to look for comparables for their quarterback room, and there just aren't any. Like, you can look at other places and be like, well, Jacoby Brissett, yeah, he started the first 3-4 games, and then they brought in the young guy behind him. Like, it's Spencer Rattler, who is 0-6, and Tyler Shough competing for that job. I think right now Rattler has a considerable lead. I think he just looks like the guy that's been in the league. He can protect the ball fairly well. Has a couple turnovers here in camp, but nothing crazy. But he looks competent. He looks like someone that has taken a step since last year. He had some moments, I thought, last year. The thing to remember there is they were down, I think, 8 offensive starters by his last start. Like, the whole offensive line was gone. Chris Olave is out. Alvin Kamara is hurt. And you're asking Spencer Rattler to try to win you games. It's a tough proposition. The degree of difficulty was insane. So maybe if he gets in there with some healthy guys, like, he'll look okay. But I don't know that I feel great about their situation as a whole. Like you said, Shough is the guy that they brought in. They picked him with the 40th pick. I was, hearing that they liked him more than Jackson Dart. So I think they got the guy they wanted to get in that position. And so far it's looked a little up and down. I would say more down than up. Some bad turnovers the last few days. I really do think he needs to get into these preseason games and really show something. Maybe he's more of a gamer. There are good moments within it. It's not like he's without talent or anything like that. Like, I don't want to make it sound like an abject disaster, but the highs have been really high and the lows have been really low, and he's got to flatten that out. I do think at some point this season, unless Rattler goes out there and he's lights out, Shough does get a chance to play because that is their guy. And I think this season for the Saints needs to be about figuring out what they have on their roster and Are you looking at Arch next year, Nussmeier, which is Doug Nussmeier's son, the Saints offensive coordinator, Klubnik, Sellers? Archie can say Arch isn't coming out, but I'm not going to believe it until I see it. If he has a great season, I think Archie's just trying to do some expectation management here, but we'll see. I mean, but I do think these guys are being judged against next year's class. And right now, I would say the Saints are still very much in the quarterback business.
Well, I was going to ask you about the quarterbacks in next year's draft at the end of this, but you went there, so I'll just go there right now.
Yeah.
Is there that weird feeling because Arch, obviously, we know the Saints element of it, and of course he's a Louisiana guy, and then the offensive coordinator's son is at LSU. I mean, is that hovering over the organization, knowing that's a reality next year?
It's such a fascinating question. I think it's hovering over like this side of the organization, but inside, this is like really, if you look at it, like they are deep into a rebuild, right? But it happened so reluctantly. Like they did not plan to get here. They did not plan to be without Derek Carr. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu retires, and if you're a rebuilding team looking at Arch next year, you're just saying, oh, wait, this is a benefit. Like this guy just walked away. Let's just not replace him, play Jonas Sanker, who we drafted in the 3rd round, and either he's good or he's not, but we aren't going to do anything to actively improve the team. And we can do it under the guise of well, we just lost somebody. Like that isn't active tanking, but it's just not trying to get better, which I think if you're looking at it through that prism, maybe you take advantage of that. But I think they're still operating as if they want to try to win every game. I don't know that Mickey Loomis is someone that's ever going to pull the plug and say, hey, you know what? Like, let's pull back on this and not try to win it. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I asked him that, like, how do you weigh the weight of where your team's at with what you're trying to do with next year's draft? Do you ever look at it? And he said, we try to win every game and deal with the fallout. And I know everybody says that, but their actions actually say it. Like there's all the time people say something with their mouth and then they're doing something else. Like the Saints say it and they do it. I don't think they want to be in the rebuild. So I don't know. I mean, do they lose X amount of games, get to the deadline and say, hey, trading Alvin Kamara, trading Demario Davis, and whatever else anybody else wants? I would be extremely surprised if they do that, just because like we haven't seen them operate on that plane yet. So until we do, I'm looking at Arch, I'm looking at Nussmeier, Sellers, Klubnik, all these guys. I don't know that they're looking at it like, well, should we try to win this game because we're hearing Arch is going to come out and now we might have the number 1 pick. I don't know if I see it.
I mean, it's the team that just saw Tyrann Mathieu retire, like you said, and a day later they signed Justin Blackmon to some real money there. So, as you said, the actions tell you they want to win this year. But since we're down this rabbit hole already, and I promise I'll get back to the preview in 2025, is there your thought? What is the reason Mickey Loomis has never been into the entire let's tear this down, let's go rip it down to the studs, let's trade away some pieces, and let's start fresh from a cap perspective, from a roster perspective? Like, why have they not gone down that road, which many people have said they probably should?
Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and this isn't me advocating for it. Like his point of view, I think when Sean Payton and Breeze walked away, I think he looked at it like Alvin Kamara is here, Ryan Ramczyk's here, Mike Thomas is here, and there's still a very good core left from that 2017 draft, 2016 draft. And within that, like I think the thing that gets overlooked is that they suddenly lost 2 Hall of Fame type players just kind of out of nowhere. Ramczyk's knee just degenerates to the point that he can't play anymore and he's done. And then Mike Thomas gets his ankle stepped on at the end of a meaningless game against Tampa Bay that they were winning at the goal line. And his career is essentially over after that. And I think those were 2 huge setbacks that kind of spiraled him down. Now, I will say that I think they should have cut bait way sooner than they did. Like the immediate Drew's gone, going to try to keep this going. That made sense to me. But I would say last year, maybe the year before, was when I started looking at it and being like, it does not make sense to invest in this roster the way they're investing in this roster. And I thought it was crazy that they were trying to hang on to it this offseason. And somehow, some way, they got the luckiest break of all time, that they had the ability to get the June 1st break without and Derek Carr then retires. Like they got the money and the cap space and it all worked out. And then Derek Carr just lets them keep the money, which I don't understand how that, like, it's the most mafia accounting move of all time. And like, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Like they got so lucky with that. And, they're here now, but Yeah, it's just not in their DNA. Like they always want to go for it. I do think they've pulled back a little bit. I do think last year they pulled back a little bit. Their biggest signing was Chase Young. It was a 1 year deal, young player. I don't think they overly invested. Well, they thought they were still trying to win this offseason. But yeah, I mean, the thing to remember here is that they went out and signed Justin Reed. They tried to keep Derek Hart. Like they were doing all this stuff. And I don't know if Justin Reed makes sense on a team that's going into a rebuild. I think he's a great player, great leader. I think they need him with where they're at, but I don't know that that move aligns with a team that is trying to rebuild or anything. So they're in a very fascinating place right now. They're in a good spot to reset quickly, but I do not think it's embraced. I would call it the accidental rebuild, honestly.
Well, Alvin Kamara is still on this team, and he's the engine of the offense for the last number of years since Drew retired. He's entering his age 30 season going into this year. Has there been any talk about maybe managing his workload differently or anything to that extent going into this year, knowing where his age is at?
Yeah, I think he wants it to go down a little bit. He definitely does not want to see like, Saquon type carries. But I mean, like I think getting him below 200 is really where they want to be, and I think that's where he needs to be, and I think that's where he would like to be at as well. I think he's been at his best when he's been around that 170, 180 number. Since 2020, they've kind of leaned on him a lot more. Last year was really high for his usage. He manages his body probably as well as anybody in the league. I spent time with him last year, like at his house. Practice ended, he goes home and he's like on a massage table. Legitimately, I thought I was going there for like an hour. Like it was like a 6.5 hour thing. And then the next day he did the same thing. And then the next day he did the same thing. So like he's putting so much into staying just ready, young, on top of things that I don't really see him fading quickly anytime soon. I think he's really taking care of himself. But I think they need to be aware of that. And I think I would hope that there's some mindfulness to like where they're at now, where they're at next year. And just I think that you can back off a little bit and just extend that longevity quite a bit. And he's just such a good presence for this team. He's the heart and soul of the organization, honestly. I think they go as he goes. And just keeping him around, keeping him going, I think is really, really important. And I just hope they wouldn't run him into the ground in a season where they're probably going to win, 4 or 5 games.
Well, we're still not fully sure who's going to be throwing the ball here going into this year, but the pass catchers is a very interesting place right now. We have Chris Olave coming back from all the concussions, and it's a scary situation just thinking about it. You bring back Brandon Cooks, which is nice. Rashid Shaheed appears to be a potential future star in this league. They bring back Juwan Johnson, 3 years and $30 million. Taysom Hill is still recovering. Foster Moreau is also another player who's been dealing with injuries. Where is the current landscape when it comes to the pass catchers going into this year? And is there any confidence that some of these guys could actually be long-term, especially with the Olave concussions?
The second part of that I think is incredibly fascinating because Shaheed's in a contract year. You mentioned Chris's concussions. Um, Cooks is another guy that you throw in this mix. I saw when Carr was here, like not expensive, good culture guy, all that, but like it's just so fascinating to see the path they were on and the path they're on now in the matter of like 3 months. Like their whole organization shifted. Long term wise, that's kind of really a quarterback dependent question. I think if they have a tough year at that position, does Shaheed want to sign here? Does Chris want to sign here? If they can't get him the ball, like at a certain point, I think those guys got to look at themselves. And the other fascinating caveat to this is that Shaheed changed agents to Drew Rosenhaus, I think, last year, and that's Chris Olave's agent as well. And I think one negotiation influences the other, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know. I mean, it really is a quarterback dependent question. Like if things are tough, like I don't think it makes sense for either one of them to stick around. And I think if the Saints are starting over at that position, maybe it doesn't make sense on anybody's side for it to keep going. So I think that's one that's going to come to light sooner than later. If I was Mickey, I would be trying to sign Shaheed in camp before the season starts. He looks great out here at these practices. He's gained about 15 pounds, and we all talk about body composition changing this time of year, but like literally, like if you've ever watched the All 22, like it can be hard to see numbers on there. And there's Chris and there's Rashid, and they both look exactly the same, and you're always looking to see who has like the armband on or whatever to tell them apart. You look at him now, like from a distance, and Shaheed looks heavier than Chris. Like he's really changed his body type. Still looks really fast. I think he's about to open up the field. He's my bet for like their breakout guy this year.
Well, we actually spoke to Rashid Shaheed during Super Bowl week, and he was all in on the city of New Orleans. Obviously, the game was there, all in on Kellen Moore. And have you heard anything about a potential extension? It is a good nugget that both of them are rep by the same person, but is there any scenario where maybe one of them does get extended before the season?
Nothing yet. And as a matter of fact, like Chris is like shut it down and doesn't want to talk about it right now, and is going into the season like betting on himself. And I think that's the smart move for him if he has a fully healthy season. And then you see Garrett Wilson just got this deal, and up until last year, their 17 game averages were like indistinguishable from one another, like same amount of yards, one touchdown apart on the average. Chris actually led, I think, in touchdowns, and then he just had all the injuries last year. So if he gets healthy and he plays well, I think like talking about it right now would just be like I couldn't advise it if I was Rosenhaus, unless you're worried about the injury, and it doesn't sound like he is. So that one's on hold, and yeah, I don't know. I have not heard anything about Shaheed talking to them yet.
Well, when it comes to Mickey, one place where he has invested a lot is the offensive line. A bunch of high draft picks. Kelvin Banks this year. Trevor Penning has not really worked out at tackle. They're trying him at guard. You have Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Talise Fuaga, their first round pick last year. Has that group gelled? Do you think it's going to be a high point for this team going into this season with whoever the quarterback is? Like, what have you seen so far out of that potential five?
I feel pretty good about them, honestly. Banks and Fuaga are both looking pretty good in camp. I think they'll be better in week 17 than they are in week one. Fuaga's moving back to the other side of the line to the right where he played in college. He was at the left last year. There's been a little bit of you can see it, every now and then. But I think he's getting better every day. Was really good last year, and Banks feels like one of them guys that could be like a foundational piece for their team, just leadership wise, personality, all that stuff. And I think he's looked as solid as they come, really, so far. Like there's been some good battles with Chase Young. Chase has won some of them, but he looks really good there. Penning feels different confidence wise. Like he feels like he's carrying himself just differently than in years past. He's looked good so far there. I think it's going to work. I had doubts when they first did it just because his career has been so tumultuous and there's been way more downs than ups to this point, but it looks like it's suiting him right now. So I do think they're going to be able to lean on that line if they stay healthy. Now, the question is Eric McCoy, he's missed like 20 games over the last 3 years. And their pressure rate, you look on PFF with and without, like it changes by 12 percentage points, which is just like a massive difference. Like he's probably like if you were doing a list of their top players, like Alvin might be one, and McCoy's probably number two on that list. Um, Incredibly important to what they do. But I do think the line's going to be their identity. They've invested so much in it, and that might be if you're looking for a reason for hope for one of these quarterbacks. If they can just protect the hell out of them, like maybe they have a chance of being at least decent at that position. But there's obviously going to be injuries at some point. I'm a little worried about the depth, and but I think going forward, it's Banks and Fuaga, and if both those hit, they at least have some building blocks going into the future. If they don't, like man, it would get really dark here really quick.
Very, very big part of Kellen Moore's offenses, wherever he
Yes.
has been the offensive line in Dallas to LA. And of course, what we saw in Philly last year. I want to flip over to the defense quickly. We talked about it before. Brandon Staley is in. He seems to be doing a pretty good job so far there, taking on that role. Where is the depth when it comes to this team? Because on the back end, Paulson Debo left, Martian Lattimore was traded, Tyron Matthew retired. The defensive line, there's some older players there. Cameron Jordan, we have Demari Davis in the middle, who is the ageless wonder. Like overall in this defense, like where is the depth, I guess, and the place that you're kind of satisfied with?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely hit it there. I mean, that's the worry spot with their defense. There's some decent players at the top. If they get some injuries, I think it gets really thin really quick. You're relying on a rookie at cornerback if there's injuries in Quincy Riley. And he came into the offseason banged up. He's playing now. He's looked okay, but definitely a big question mark there. Linebacker, if you get injuries there, I think you're looking at fifth round pick Danny Stutzman, who's been one of the better players in their camp. But again, a rookie, you don't really how that's going to hold up under fire. And they've been practicing against a potentially iffy offense. And it's safety. If you get an injury there, you're looking at third round pick Jonas Sanker is being the depth. Up front, they've done a decent job of like kind of filling out their defensive line, but it's not. I think it's a lot of like good second tier players. I don't know that you have a lot of headliners. Brian Brzee is kind of the guy that really needs to put it together. Really good pass rusher, has had issues in run defense. We'll see. Like if he puts it all together, like that could be a building block for this team. But I think they're scary on the depth front, and then on the edge, like if Carl Granderson or Chase Young goes down, you're looking at Chris Rumpf and Isaiah Foskey, and Kim Gordon obviously is still there, but it's not a very deep team anywhere. And with all the injuries they had last year, I mean, you definitely have to look at that second list of players. And I don't feel great about that middle class of their roster.
I want to ask you about two particular players on defense. Number one, Chase Young was once upon a time a defensive rookie of the year and looked like a future star. Had that awful injury, which was way more than an ACL. Took him a long time to recover from it. They gave him a nice chunk of change this offseason to come back, a 3-year deal worth over $30 million, if I recall correctly. Have you seen a little bit of the old Chase Young here, and that's maybe the reason why they invested that much into him?
He also had a neck surgery going into last year, and yeah. So he's a year removed from that. I think everyone you talk to is gonna be like, oh, he looks better than last year. Like every player on every team that's any good, like, oh no, he's having a good camp. Like I really do think Chase is having a good camp. I think he's moving different, and I don't know what this means, and it might be a BS thing to evaluate that means nothing, but he personality-wise, he seems incredibly different this year. Like, last year, there was kind of like an orneriness to things, like a frustration, and, like, he seems actually happy right now, and he's talking about how he's enjoying playing football again, nothing hurts, all this stuff. So, we'll see. He's still a younger player. It's kinda crazy. Like, he got drafted in 2020, like, he feels old. He's still, like, young. He's still somebody that could be part of a rebuild. I think part of the reason for paying him though is that like where are you getting that pass rusher if you don't pay him? Like you you're probably not drafting him unless you're way up in the draft. These guys don't hit the open market. I think it was a calculated risk, like as somebody to invest in, and the downside there really isn't that far down. Like he's still always going to be a good productive player. It's just are you going to get 8.5 sacks, 10 sacks out of him, or is it going to be 4 or 5? Last year there was a ton of pressure. They didn't really convert into sacks. I think there is still upside here. But that also, like realistically, could be a player where you're kind of always chasing that upside because of he has everything. Like he has the size, he has the speed, incredibly smart. Like he looks explosive out at practice, and then it just doesn't always translate into these huge numbers. It's kind of maybe clowny-ish at times. But I do think he's a good player, and I think he's going to be part of their rebuild. Just at the end of the season, do you have pass rusher too, or are you looking at one of these guys high in the draft to maybe be your pass rusher one?
He just turned 26 years old. When his contract is up, he's
Yeah.
still not 30. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, but we'll see how he does this year. The other player that I wanted to ask you about, we mentioned how the back end has had a lot of departures. Kool-Aid McKinstry fell to the second round last year. Is he somebody that you guys are expecting him to step up and actually take on the cornerback one role? And do you have any confidence in him?
Yeah, I would put him as pleasant surprise number one of camp on their list. Really, really does look good. Like last year coming into it, he had a foot injury and he couldn't really work out the whole offseason. You're going through the draft process, people's bodies are changing, you're traveling everywhere. And he came to camp and I think he was a little bit overweight. And I think he was chasing that kind of all year long. By the end of the season, you started to see some glimmers. He had some really good reps against Mike Evans when they played Tampa Bay. And now coming back this year, like he's lost weight, he's moving faster, he looks different, he's making plays. I would say he's turning and running with Olave and Shaheed. Like he's not getting thrown at a lot, and that's really kind of the thing with this camp right now with this secondary. It feels like the secondary is playing good, but most of the passes have been like check downs, and they aren't really getting attacked down the field. So it's hard to tell, but it does look like he's moving well. When he's been challenged, he's held up well. He has an interception, has a couple pass breakups. some really standout moments, and they are playing in the same scheme that he played in at Alabama. So I think that's just kind of a natural fit there too. So he feels comfortable. He looks good. He does feel like, to some degree, an answer for one of those two cornerback spots, which I think is important as you look at this rebuild, because Alontae Taylor is in a contract year as well. He could be on his way out of here. And like, this is a team that could have a bunch of needs at very high level positions. So like, scratching one off at cornerback, I think is really important to their future prospects.
My last two things here before I wrap it up. Week 1 versus the Cardinals, they come into the dome. What would you say are fair, realistic expectations for this team going into 2025? I mean, the NFL clearly has no hopes for them because they gave them 0 primetime games, but what do you feel like is the fair, realistic expectation for them?
I've been at 5 wins. I think that's what they probably look like right now. And you want to get the five and have some bright spots at the end of the season. Like, it doesn't have to be a complete abyss, but I think this season for the Saints, if you're planning on watching this team, is really just about tracking the progress of the younger players, seeing where they're at, and maybe not living and dying with the results, and just kind of being prepared. And if you get pleasantly surprised, you get pleasantly surprised. But I think it's probably more realistic that they're around that 5 win total, and I feel like they're probably stacking up most of those five in the back half. Like, that's where their schedule softens up, which is where it becomes fascinating. To go back to our earlier question, like, they could be on a path to potentially looking like they're right there to get the number one pick, and then the schedule eases up, and like, what's your decision at that point? And I think that's going to be a huge, fascinating thing with this team right around the trade deadline.
Last year, the number 1 overall pick quite literally flipped like 4 times the last 6 weeks of the season. So you never know what could happen when those teams start winning all of a sudden because of how the schedule shakes out. Last question for you, Nick, and I really appreciate all the time so far here. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. Every Tuesday, we have somebody in the NFL who deserves more recognition, player, coach, or executive. Your boots on the ground. You know the Saints better than anybody. Who is somebody in that organization who you think deserves some more spotlight?
Okay, so like, in the front office, everyone always talks about, they talk about Kai doing the contracts, like he's kind of the godfather of the cap manipulation. Everyone knows Mickey. Jeff Ireland gets talked about for 2017 draft and the successes there. Nobody ever really talks about like their personnel guy, Michael Parrington, who I think has done a really good job of getting like league minimum salary players to fill out their roster like year after year, and they've had to do a lot of that just to keep going with the way they manage their cap. I think he does a really good job. And I think one of the stars on the staff, potentially like a rising guy that I think might show up. And I've seen it already. Like, I'm speaking way too early here, but I want to buy the stock early on TJ Paginetti, who came over from the Eagles. He's our run game coordinator. A lot of the stuff we're seeing in this camp like looks way more creative in terms of the running game. And I say that saying that we watched a Kubiak offense last year where they do a lot of creative stuff, like in Shanahan influence in that. Like, some of the stuff they're doing out here like really stands out. I think he's going to be a riser on the staff. Scott Tolzien, if they have any success, he's the quarterback coach. Like, he would be another one. So a couple sleepers maybe, and a guy that probably hasn't gotten enough credit for some of the acquisitions they've made over the years.
Michael Barrington, an agent, has mentioned to me as someone who should be on the show in the future. So you're not the first one. I've heard the name before. I'm sure fans never heard of him, and he probably deserves to be on here. So we'll work on that. And getting ahead of a name is never a bad thing. So we will definitely keep an eye on everyone else that you mentioned there. But Nick, I want to thank you for coming on over here. Everyone could subscribe to your amazing work at NewOrleans.Football. Follow you on all social media with Nick Underhill. And thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck this season.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.